Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your space for Black news, views, and opinions. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It is Monday, January 17th, 2022. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Nielle.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo. And on today's report, we remember Dr. King and his legacy. We also talk parades and cancellations due to COVID.
We also talked to head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and Senate leaders fight for voting rights and a day of service to honor Martin Luther King in New York.
We have that and so much more on this important day. And you know how we do it from our perspective, our voice, and our truth. You ready? Let's go.
And on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we have a special show prepared for you dedicated to remembering and honoring the civil rights legacy, the civil rights icon's legacy. His fight for equality is even more poignant right now as Congress prepares to debate voting rights legislation this week. Dr. King himself spoke about the filibuster and its use decades ago.
The tragedy is that we have a Congress with a Senate that has a minority of misguided senators who will use the filibuster to keep the majority of people from even voting.
That was deep. That was so deep that he would say that in a time in the 1960s, and it's happening today. We are still talking about the filibuster today. Same situation. Black and brown people are fighting for voting rights. It's crazy.
It really is crazy. As we celebrate Martin Luther King today, we have to understand his words were so passionate, his fight was so strong then, and we thought we had to pass those moments, and to be still in that same place, to be stagnant like this when it comes to voting rights, it's very embarrassing for our country. We have to understand, you know, things have accomplished, things have moved along since then, right? We understand that, but for this to still be at a standstill, that is a major problem.
We talked about it last week on our show where the King family kind of was like, hey, we really don't even want celebrations today if legislation, voting rights legislation was not in place today. So definitely looking forward to seeing what celebrations are happening around the world, because they're not really interested in a celebration of any kind today.
Yeah, COVID is playing a role with that as well, preventing some of the parades and celebrations that would typically happen from going on. But it is interesting that Chuck Schumer, the majority leader in the Senate, promised to have this voted on by today. And now we're seeing that, you know, it's a little delayed. They're going to get to it this week, but we were hoping to have this done already.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I believe that we can celebrate the legacy and the accomplishments of Dr. King today, as well as make it a day of action to make sure that we're calling our Congress members' offices to let them know that we want voting rights legislation passed immediately. All right, soulmates, joining us now to discuss the legacy of Dr. King and the fight for voting rights is Congress member from the state of Georgia. Welcome, Hank Johnson.
Thank y'all for having me. I'm happy to be with you.
No, we are so honored on this special day. Like, we can celebrate Dr. King as well as make it a day of action. So talk to us about what's happening right now on Capitol Hill. We know that the House last week voted to combine the two bills, to push it to the Senate, to give Chuck Schumer something to work with. What's happening on Capitol Hill right now?
Well, we're going to have to wait for Senator Schwartz to finish with his quarantine that was imposed upon him once he tested positive for COVID. And so he's in a 5-day timeout period. He's asymptomatic. And so looks like he will be arriving in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, Tuesday. And at some point this week, we expect the Senate to take up the Voting Rights Advancement, or the Voting Rights Advancement John Lewis Act, which the House passed. It was a combination of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Actually, the name of that legislation is Freedom to Vote John Lewis Advancement Act. And we expect the Senate to take that up during this coming week. And I'm still hopeful that we will get it passed, that we will do filibuster reform, the Senate, that is, will do filibuster reform, and we'll be able to get it passed.
So with the two bills, we've got the John Lewis Act that is attempting to tackle some of the protections that have been lost, and the Freedom to Vote Act that you mentioned, adding additional days, making it a national holiday, the House merging those two together before sending it to the Senate. How important was it to merge the two bills? Do they stand a better chance of passing now that there could be just one piece of legislation to consider?
Well, it's a matter of efficiency. Instead of the Senate having to spend double the time in debate, it can spend, an adequate time debating just one bill, and then cut straight to the chase and either vote it up or vote it down. And if they vote it down, then we will know who stands on the wrong side of history, even among Democrats in the Senate. Two, I expect are the ones that are holding things up, but I'm hopeful that we will get them aboard and we will pass that piece of legislation and protect democracy for all people, not just Black people.
Right. You brought up history. So let's talk about it. The parallels of the civil rights movement and the right to vote today, it's startling to us all. Now, President Biden finds himself in the same position that Lyndon B. Johnson was in when Dr. King and other civil rights leaders were pressing him to pass voting rights. We know that the Civil Rights Act had to pass before voting rights was even put in, and then we passed it later. What can Joe Biden do at this point, finding himself in the same position? What are his options to push this bill through, or does he have any?
Well, we know who the two holdouts are. We're in a 50-50 Senate. We've got 48 Democrats in the Senate who are for filibuster reform with respect to voting rights legislation. We have two holdouts, and those are the two that we're focusing upon. I think the president met with both of them this past Friday in the White House, and I'm sure that there will be ongoing discussions between them, between those two holdouts and Chuck Schumer and the rest of the Democrats in the Senate. And perhaps they're paying attention to the chatter that's going on social media and online. Perhaps these two senators are paying attention to that. I know their staffs are. Perhaps they're paying attention to the letters and the emails that are coming to their office. I think everything that we can do to help spur them to take the proper action, we need to do. We don't need to give up, don't need to give out or give in, as John Lewis used to say. Let's stay the course, let's get this done.
Congressmember, you were in attendance, I believe, for the president and the vice president's visit to Georgia. Last week, they made that appearance there, appealing to the nation, appealing to Congress to get this done. What were your thoughts being there, seeing it? Was it a photo op? Was it substantial?
No, I think the president made a strong statement in support of filibuster reform. And of course, we all knew that he was in favor of voting rights protection legislation. And so he did what I expected him to do. And I noticed in the audience were young people, older people, middle-aged people, people from all sectors at the Atlanta University Center, who listened to what he had to say and approved of what he had to say. And I thought it was a great speech that he gave. And also our vice president gave a great speech on the issue also. They are firmly committed to doing whatever it takes to pass voting rights legislation out of the Senate and for that to happen right now.
You brought up the filibuster, and we know historically the filibuster has been known to stop civil rights, from anti-lynching to discrimination towards housing to even voting. What do you think needs to happen to the filibuster? You know, on the Hill, they're arguing that we need. Some people say we need to keep it. Some people say get rid of it. What are your thoughts of the filibuster?
Well, the filibuster has a history of being used by racists to deny the right of Black people in this country. It's a racist artifact of the past. Its time has come and gone. Its usefulness is no longer there. What it is used for now is to simply obstruct the business of the Senate. the Senate has been in gridlock for so long because of the filibuster and unable to do the work of the American people, not just voting rights legislation, but even the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the Build Back Better, all of the things that the House has passed on to the Senate is mired in gridlock and unable to pass because of the filibuster. And so the time for the filibuster has gone away. It's now time for a majority to rule in the Senate, just like that is the rule in every other deliberative body, both in the houses of Congress, the houses and senates of each state. Nobody has the filibuster. And in the House of Representatives in Congress, we don't have a filibuster. The only folks with a 60 vote or 3/5 majority requirement is the Senate. And they need to rid themselves of that obstruction so that they can join us and start doing the people's business.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this special day. And we'd love to have you back to talk about infrastructure. We know that's a passion of yours.
Well, thank you all so much. And we'll be listening to you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Appreciate it.
All right, soulmates, the Senate will delay its scheduled January recess and begin deliberating on voting legislation tomorrow. Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said last week that they will skip the recess to get the legislation passed, despite major obstacles that challenge the Democrats' ability to get it done. The end of the filibuster to pass the voting rights, the end of it, the legislation has been discussed for some time now, but President Joe Biden is ready to move forward to get the legislation passed. Though determined, President Biden has expressed some doubt that it will get passed through the Senate, saying, "I hope we can get this done." The honest God answer is, "I don't know whether we can get this done." He continued, "I hope we can get this done, but I'm not sure. But one thing for certain, like every other major civil rights bill that came along, if we missed the first time, we can come back and try a second time. And will it be a third or a fourth?" Here's what we know. Now, we just had Congressman Hank Johnson on explaining why it was pushed until tomorrow because the senator of Hawaii is out for COVID. But we do know that Republicans have blocked 3 previous election-related bills, right? So they're not going to budge. At some point, we got to figure out how the Democrats are going to push this through and say enough is enough. We need to get this done because, honestly, for MLK Day today, we should be celebrating the fact that this bill has been passed, and it's not.
Yeah, it's tragedy. And I want to encourage everybody, if you have not seen a movie called All the Way, it is the story of Lyndon B. Johnson and Dr. King and other civil rights leaders, and how the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, how civil rights leaders pushed and they met with Lyndon B. Johnson, the struggles that Lyndon B. Johnson had. And I think that it's important to note that at that time in history, Democrats represented the Dixie, they represented slave masters, they represented the good old party of the South. And it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that passed that black people started to become Democrats. So if you want to know about our history a little more from a movie perspective, I definitely recommend the movie All the Way.
We absolutely will check that out.
Yeah.
So as we reported last week, the passing of comedy legend Betty White struck a chord with the black community, and now we have some people in New Orleans who are upset that her funeral was planned on the same day as MLK Day parade and demanded that they move it. The organizer of the parade, Carl Mack, he set the date for Betty White's birthday, which happens to be today, MLK Day. After some criticism for the move, which Mack maintains was unintentional, he moved the parade to yesterday, January 16th. White was well known for her challenging of race relations, having featured black artists like Arthur Duncan on her variety show.
Well, due to the Omicron surge of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of cities have reconsidered whether to hold MLK Day events. The Tallahassee NAACP announced that they're going to err on the side of caution, canceling their MLK Day parade. This announcement comes as other states all across the country are debating the safety of large gatherings.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s family is planning to commemorate the January federal holiday in a new way by pressuring Congress to pass the federal voting rights legislation. So no celebration without legislation, said Martin Luther King Jr. III, vowing to use his father's memory to press Congress and the White House to get voting rights bills across the finish line, just as they voted for a bill to deal with infrastructure bridges and all of the things that go along with infrastructure. We are now saying use that same effort, that same focus to pass the John Lewis bill and the Freedom to Vote Act. The family plans to march across bridges in Arizona and Washington, D.C. over the holiday weekend, and a nod to the historic Civil Rights March across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. This is very powerful. Martin Luther King Jr. Day has always been a day, especially in the Black community, that we take pride in. A lot of people are off work on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so this is a very big deal that the family is calling for no celebration. And you know, Romeo, back to your point that we should be celebrating that these two bills were passed today. Like, we should be literally having our cookout and celebrating, look what we were able to get accomplished. And because we are not, it really makes you wonder, like, what is happening in Congress right now?
Yeah, it definitely puts a dimmer over the day. You know, but what I would say, I love the fact that it becomes a teaching moment when we talk about MLK Day. Even my son, who's 8 years old, they talk about it in school, right? Because honestly, I got that information on Martin Luther King growing up, but I did not get a lot of other history that we know we missed out on. So look, even though it's not the day that we want it to be for our celebrating the voting rights bill, we have to honor this day, and we need to teach our young generation about it so they can pass along as well.
I like the way the Obamas, when they were in office, they transformed the King holiday. When President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle came in office, they, on King's holiday, they changed it into a day of service. So instead of just celebrating, you know, they went and they volunteered at group homes, or they painted a house, or they served food to the homeless. And so King Day is a day of celebration, but it's also a day of service. And that's what Dr. King represented, to be your brothers and sisters' keeper, to look out for the least of things. And so as we reflect on Dr. King today, also think about how you can serve your brothers and sisters better, not just today, but moving forward.
That's a great call to action, Yo.
Absolutely.
Organizers of this year's Martin Luther King Day celebration at the Fargo Theater were planning to require COVID-19 vaccination cards to attend Monday's event in person. However, theater executive director Emily Beck said the nonprofit is barred from requiring vaccination cards to enter the facility because they sell a product or service. The law states that business can't require vaccination cards or reject customers due to their COVID-19 vaccination status. State and local government entities can't require residents to disclose their vaccination or antibody status either, except for public colleges, prisons, jails, the state hospital, and public health units, the law states. Masks will be highly encouraged at this year's MLK event. Beck said the Fargo Theater is leaving mask requirements up to show producers. And, you know, I agree. Look, this is the problem we have all across the country, right? Depending on where you are, what city you're in, what state you're in, they could be mandated. They could say you have to show vaccination. Here in LA County, to go to any event, you have to show that. But Fargo is different. But I do understand the population is not as big as Los Angeles. So this is why we've had the ongoing problem of high numbers across our country, because different rules in different states.
You know, before we started our show, there was a conversation about the CDC or Anthony Fauci saying, well, you know, everyone's going to get the virus. And so that's why I'm terrified of the narrative that we're just like, okay, we can all get it, because honestly, it's safe to say like, oh, well, everyone will get it, but you don't know if you're going to get Omicron. You don't know if you're going to get Delta. You don't know if you're going to get the original strain of COVID-19. And so that's why I'm nervous for everyone to be like, oh, I can get it, but you don't know if it's going to be in your body. We still have people that are fighting for their lives. We have children. Pediatric hospitalizations are up to an all-time high. And so at this point, I really want to encourage everyone to still treat this. Don't treat it like a flu, because you don't know what your body is going to do when it actually affects you. So just do whatever you can to protect yourself, because you just never know.
Yeah, I was talking to some people who have had both of the strains, Delta and Omicron, and they say they're both bad. You don't want either of them, so it's unfortunate to hear Dr. Fauci saying that everybody's likely going to get it, but if you're boosted, vaccinated from the start, you should be okay.